Hey everybody, it's Party Elite taking an in-depth look at the campaign map reveal footage. Now, I assume by this point in time everyone has seen that video at least once, if not twice. If you have not yet seen it, I definitely suggest checking it out. I will have a link to it in the description below. Breathtaking views, I love the narrator's voice, he is back. So make sure you check that out, because over here what we're going to do is actually a play-by-play. Take a look at what we're seeing, what we're being shown, and maybe some things that we may have missed. First things first, we've got Ulthuan and the Vortex, of course, stuff that we're very familiar with by this point, I'm sure. The Vortex, again, it's the focal point of all faction campaigns in this new game, at least for the starting 4 factions. We don't know about DLC factions yet. Nothing too surprising here, though. In the foreground, it seems like we've got Vol's Anvil. This might be a strategic control point, or it might just be aesthetic and fluff. Would be nice to see armor and weapon buffs based on territory held, like throughout the faction, but I doubt that'll be the case. It might have a strategic structure that you can build to get those buffs, though.
Before us lies Ulthuan, home of the High Elves. At its center, at the very Isle of the Dead, the great Vortex surges and swirls. Forged by the High Elves in ages past to siphon the winds of magic and defeat the Chaos invasion that threatened to engulf the world. As the fork-tongued comet of Sotek made its recent passage across the heavens, it breached the Great Warding, making it dangerously unstable. There are those who would unbind the Vortex and exploit its wild energies. Still others seek to heal the cyclone and preserve the order. Each race must...
Now we get a great look at the inner kingdoms of Ulthuan. That neon green banner looks like Avalorn, while the blue banner with the rearing Pegasus is Illyrion. The deep blue banner at the back there is the banner of Safari, while at the front left corner we see the banner of Calador. And finishing off where we started more or less, Eataine.
Both to decide the fate of the Vortex and prevent the other races from achieving victory. Let us take a
now this looks like Lothern with Tyrion standing beside it, looking pretty swell, pretty swank.
They are a proud, arrogant, and highly developed people, combining peerless martial prowess with an uncommon...
And as we're floating through Ulthuan now, we look at various High Elf agents, cities, and territories. This looks like a lord on a chariot, perhaps. And we talk about the influence mechanic. I already went over this in a previous video. Basically, you use influence not only to help steer other factions diplomatically into doing what you want them to do, but you use it also to bring higher tier lords under your wing. So you might start with some low tier generic lords, but as you gain more influence, you're able to actually convince more people of better stature and better capabilities to join you as the High Elves. Now we've actually paused here to look at the White Tower of Hoeth. Though this is where Teclis makes his home, it's not actually his starting point in the campaign, but more on that later.
Affairs of other, lesser races. The High Elves are also master traders and exploit their contacts to gain valuable intelligence.
And here, we can see some ships off to the distance. Well, just the one fleet. The White Horse. Can't identify the flag, but maybe it's a reference to the Norscan tribes. The narrator is talking about trade at this point, though, so it might be something else instead. Maybe Araby? It's a massive jump in logic. Maybe it's Estalia. I don't think so, for reasons I'll get into later, though. Most likely there's something Norscan. The banner toppers do look a little Norscan as well, so let's just say they're some, Viking raiders. Also on the left here, we do have the banner of Shrace. Now, seeing these sort of iconic factions split apart on the campaign map makes me wonder if high-tier units are only available once the High Elves are united, or, per captured region, something like that when you're playing as Tyrion, obviously. Teclis would have a much harder time bringing it all together from where he starts. Now, as we roll on, we see what looks more like a challenge or a duel rather than anything else. And here, we have a glimpse of the Dark Elves, I believe. That looks like the banner of Hagreif. Probably pronouncing that terribly wrong. I believe we're in Nagaraith right now, so a Dark Elf reclamation army makes sense around these parts. Here, you can see the one of many fortress gates that act as entry points to the inner ring of Ulthuan. You can't just pass over the mountains, but have to battle for control at these fortress gate settlements. And these are actually settlements that give you various other benefits as well as giving you access to the center. And the battle is a new type of siege battle where you can't bring siege equipment. So make sure you're bringing a large force to bear. You can't enter here as another faction at all unless you've taken a fortress gate, as I said before, but some of the yet unannounced races might have some ways of sneaking in here. It would be fitting of their nature, and would create a constant foreign threat outside of rogue armies when playing as the High Elves in the beginning of the campaign. Otherwise, you're dealing with internal strife. A lot of the early campaign as High Elves is probably going to be a matter of putting Ulthuan completely under your control. And now we're about to fly over the water a little bit, and as I discussed in my previous videos, we're going to see a lot of encounters at sea to keep the waters interesting. With so much water to be traversed, keeping it interesting is going to be very important. So we're getting these storms that move around between turns, and we're going to see events similar to ruins on land as well. I'm hoping storms cause damage over time, rather than randomly wiping out entire fleets and armies with them. That would really put things in the player's hands. How much damage are you willing to take on before you make landfall? Here's a Lizardmen fleet, I believe, and now we see what will probably be one of those many encounters at sea, the water equivalent of ruins. You interact with these to unlock lots of loot, or they'll throw you into a rough situation, so pray to the dice gods, basically. As we roll on, just want to point out what looks like rough or impassable terrain here by the shore. Maybe you take damage or attrition if you stay here for too long. Maybe it takes an extra turn to traverse through the water. When it looks like this, it might just be an aesthetic choice, but it certainly looks and sounds like it isn't the safest place to travel by sea. And now we can see something we've already talked about in the past, the Vampire Coast. Playable? Not at the beginning, almost certainly, though maybe free content at some point, or some modders will unlock it for us. Nonetheless, they're real, they're very much present. I imagine Harkon will command them. We might even get them as a Bretonnia equivalent in the first game, sort of battle-ready at first and then campaign-ready later. One can hope for unique units, unique skins, and if we're lucky, unique campaign mechanics, if and when they become playable. Now we're floating by, you can see some ruins here again, ready to be looted by you or your adversaries, and again you can settle them as well, and we can see all these round banners of the Lizardmen, and now we get a closer look at a ruin that you can either loot for wealth or build into a settlement again. Now, the ruin is to the right, but to the left, is that possibly a Skaven-controlled city? Is it possible that unless you're playing as Skaven, you can't see where they are and instead have to look out for that ominous green glow of Warpstone coming from underground? Is it possible that this marketing campaign has started to drive me completely crazy? I say yes to all of the above, but we'll see when the game comes out. It'd be neat if the Skaven are constantly hidden from view and only able to settle in ruins, but we know literally nothing, so let's move on to this rogue army, led by a tree man. Again, these rogue armies are mixed faction armies between new and old factions that pop up at random, but are based on actual lore as per what I recall from the dev interview I had. So these guys can be extremely interesting in their composition. We see here this one's led by a tree man, but again, we were told an example of a goblin beastmaster, I believe it was, leading an army of giants, feral bastillodons, and the like. So very exciting times to be had there, especially if and when these guys grow to a strong enough size to actually capture cities and settle down. Also, this looks like a Lizardman agent, but not sure what it might be. Maybe something that can hinder or hurt enemy troop movements, or bolster your own army experience. That's 100% speculation, though, completely based on aesthetics, so let's not think about that too much. We also see the evidence of dwarven architecture and a dwarf faction here. Mine of the Bearded Skull, perhaps? That certainly sounds dwarven, but I don't recall them being an actual faction, so let me know what you think about that, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course. And now we move down, finally, to Turtle Isles, from where Teclis starts, a very far away and different start. Tyrion has to deal with High Elf nonsense, while Teclis starts off dealing with Lizardmen and all their glory. Tyrion might also have allies nearby, while Teclis most certainly does not. He'll have a harder time. I'm loving the implication of this very distant starting point. If all the factions are treated this way, we might see some serious replayability in each faction. This ship is also different from the ones we saw earlier. I guess there are tiers of naval vessels between trade and combat capable and transport and agents, so this is probably just a showcase of that difference. Now we're going to pivot around, and there's confirmation of a greenskin tribe, though I couldn't tell you which one. Feel free to inform me in the comments below. So again, more evidence of old world races making a show, while we now shift towards what looks like the Lizardman Temple City, connected to the geomantic web, as explained in my previous interview video, allowing them to be powered up and level up their building tech based on how many cities they're connected to on the geomantic web. Reminder though, the cities connected in the web can only work to the strength of the weakest city tier, so it's going to be an interesting mechanic for the Lizardmen as well, connecting all these cities, sort of influencing their path of growth. Now as we fly around, we see the Greenskins pass by us again. We've got a skink here, anyone can guess what that agent might be.
Should the Lizardmen revitalize these strands, their efforts to enact the great plan will be...
And here is another Greenskin tribe, and the city behind him looks like it's covered in greenskin decor, so that's pretty interesting as well.
Here we see
Now, as the narrator starts talking about Mazda Mundi, he completely ignores a few things. On the right, looks like it might be Perazzo's Lost Legion. If that is the case, that means we're looking at the Dogs of War, probably out here looking for treasures and possibly an early ally of the Lizardmen. I really hope that they're at least slightly reskinned, if not completely built from the ground up. Maybe for DLC at least. They most certainly won't be playable at launch though. And behind that flag, we see the brown banner that could be seen further off to the right earlier as well. There were a couple more of those banners. They seem to be topped with the Chaos banner topper as well, so I'm guessing these are Norscan raiders, maybe Skeggi. And now we see Mazda Mundi in all his glory upon his platform. He's floating in the Geomancy stance, which gives him a significant bump in how far he can see, and from what was mentioned during my interview in Santa Monica, it also gives a higher ambush chance and Vanguard deployment. Again, some of those mechanics might still be shifting and changing though. It's supposed to help the player feel more like a Lizardman commander, always aware of what's going on in this part of the world, and it looks gorgeous. But we'll talk about Mazda Mundi in depth some other day. It's a little early to talk about him, just looking at what little we've seen so far with his skill tree and all, so let's move on with that note on Geomancy. Now we swing by another ruin that's there to, I think, distract us with its shimmering, glowing yellow sort of vibrance, so that we don't notice the other shimmering object directly to the left of it. Small, it's green, it's smoking, and I feel like there's a bit of a shimmer on it as well, so that's some Warpstone, I'm guessing. And this would imply that it's a collectible resource. Is it only for the Skaven, or can other races collect it as well? Are you maybe more likely to bump into Skaven in a ruin nearby Warpstone? Very interesting placement there, and I think that's why the camera sweeps down over here.
Kroq-Gar and his
Now we see another Lizardman unit. I'm sure he's a big deal. Looks like he's about to go off and fight a battle. I'm sure we'll see plenty of that battle in due time. Can't wait to see it. And with that, we have our first glimpse of the campaign map we get to conquer this September. Let me know if I missed anything, and let me know your thoughts on what we saw and what I said. I'm curious to know what didn't catch my eye, though I try to be pretty thorough with these things. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and make sure you subscribe for more Total War content. There's plenty to come, especially with the second game right around the corner.